Firstly, I wanted to first dedicate this year to my former mother-in-law, Yutta Bas Rav Yosef, and that the shir should be, the schus of the shir should go from Aliyah's neshama, from the schus of the shir. What I'd like to talk about tonight is something which is, I feel, very fascinating. Because there is an entire theoretical structure to Tu B'Shvat. What is Tu B'Shvat? And it has an entire understanding of Tu B'Shvat, which is, it's called a theoretical structure. But there are certain events which have happened in Shvat, last week, the week before, after Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which is outstanding in terms of the whole concept of a messianic process. And what I decided to do is I would combine those two events with Tu B'Shvat. So you can actually, what Tu B'Shvat is, theoretically, and what its manifestation is in terms of that it's literally happening in front of us. That's what I want to do tonight. The two events that I refer to is the incredible event of Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, giving a shir, speaking in front of the Knesset, you know. But that has enormous repercussions, which, you know, as you know, it was an incredible speech. But what's more incredible is the meaning in terms of the messianic process. The second thing I want to speak about is also an event that happened after Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and that is Netanyahu's visit, Bibi Netanyahu's visit to India. And I want to deal with who is India, what is India, and why was the reception that it received such an incredible reception? That's what I want to talk about also. So I have this three-part sections, like I said, you know, and I'm hoping it'll give you really a great picture of the meaning of Tu B'Shvat and how it's literally happening in front of our eyes. Anyway, that's what I'm going to speak. So if you came to hear about Tu B'Shvat, you'll get that. But if you also want to hear about the 21st century, you get that too, in combination. So I think you'll really be happy that you came. Mike Pence was the Vice President of the United States, of course, you know. He gave, really in many ways, an astounding speech to the Knesset. And just based on its own idea, the speech itself, it was remarkable. You know, for a man of his stature, Vice President of the United States, you know, to talk the way he did about Jews, about Israel, about the history of the Jews, it's just remarkable to hear that, because it's never been heard before, especially by the United States. You know, and if you compare the previous presidents, you know, they cannot even rise an iota to what Pence said. But what Pence said is even more remarkable, because in many ways it is a tremendous progression of the whole concept of the 21st century, which what I talked about 2 weeks ago. So in many ways, this is an add-on, addendum to that shir. How do we understand that speech? Let's go back. And I've spoken about this, but I need to say these ideas again, because they're critical to give you a framework again to understand. The Torah, we know that what the Torah says is the concept of a man called Esav. Now there's a brother, Yaakov, of course, Yaakov Avinu. Esav is his brother. And we know what's interesting about all of that is that Esav really had a job. Actually, what I really, I brought the speech with me, believe it or not, because I am going to comment on it. But what is incredible about this speech, and I really want to just say that first, is the last thing that he said. And most people will just gloss over it, but it has unbelievable spiritual impact. Here's what he said. With an unshakable bond between our people, in the United States, and our shared commitment to freedom, I say from my heart. That's a very important word, my heart. Now, I'm not saying it for political considerations. I'm telling you what I feel. Now, here goes. And this stuff is just beyond belief. May God bless the Jewish people. 1. Then he said, may God bless the state of Israel. That's 2. And all who call these lands their home. And may God continue to bless the United States of America. That's what he says. I mean, a statement like that is just beyond belief. Now, but there is something odd here. That's what you have to notice. He really should have said, may God bless the state of Israel. Because that's what he's talking for the state of Israel, the Knesset, which obviously is the official government, and he should have just said that. What's this, may God bless the Jewish people? Because the Jewish people and the state of Israel are two different things. The Jewish people are people that have gone through thousands of years without the state of Israel. You know, the Jewish people as an entity on themselves, what's called Klal Yisrael, or Knesset Yisrael. Knesset Yisrael. In many ways, it's not the state of Israel, because he's referred to the political state called Israel now. So therefore, why is he saying both things? He should just say, may God bless the state of Israel. And that's politically correct. Not really. But it's certainly in terms of him as being in the United States. And that's really what I want to deal with. What does that mean? The first man, he has a job to do. What is the job of Adam Rishon? He has to bring God back into the world. We know that thing is called Tikkun. Adam Rishon, although he's not Jewish, is called a Mesaken, or in Hebrew, Metaken. He rectifies and corrects creation. He's the first guy to have that job because he was not Jewish, because the original intent of God was not to give it to Jews. He wanted all mankind to be part of the Tikkun process. Tikkun means rectification, correction, restoration, however you want to understand it. That's what Tikkun means, right? So Adam Rishon is the first Mesaken, Ashkenazi pronunciation. That's who he is. Okay. And that's what God wanted. But Adam failed. Because so as a result of his failure, God now gave that ability to do the Tikkun, he now gave it to mankind. All mankind now had the ability to do Tikkun. Again, there were no Jews, you see, because God never intended that the Jewish people should do the Tikkun, even though that's what happened. Of course, God knew that. But his intent was that all mankind should do the Tikkun. And therefore, it passes from Adam, it passes now to all mankind. Now, somebody who has the ability to do Tikkun is called the Yisrael. That's what Yisrael really is. Yisrael refers not to a nation. It refers to an individual who has a certain type of soul, neshama, that can do the tikkun, without getting into that. That's what Yisrael really is. Okay. So therefore, Adam Rishon, even though he wasn't a Yehudi, wasn't Jewish, but he was Yisrael, which is interesting. So the first Yisrael was really Adam Rishon, as we will see, not Yaakov. In any case, once he failed, the job was given over to the rest of mankind, and they became Yisrael, even though they're not Jewish. And there were 70 nations. They failed also, we know, because of the flood, right? And also the Tower of Babel, where they wanted a war against God. They all failed. So God appears to Avraham Avinu, and he said, listen, nobody's doing what I want them to do, and that is to do my will. And my will bring me back. And that's the tikkun, that's the correction. So therefore, I'm now going to give you the ability to do tikkun, which really Avraham Avinu had, because Avraham Avinu was really part of the 70 nations, right? So he anyway had it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it away from everybody else. And therefore that created a concept called Goy, non-Jew, or Gentile. That was the origin of the concept of a Gentile, you see. So what God took away from them is the term called Yisrael. They no longer were Yisrael. I'm being very brief because, I want to proceed. So therefore Avraham Avinu is now called Yisrael, but not yet. Why? Because in order to be the Masaki that God wants, you have to earn it. And Avraham Avinu, of course, earned it. It was incredible. He passed every test that God gave him, right? We know that, all 10 tests. and he made many gerim, hundreds of, maybe thousands of people to believe in God, you see. So he did a magnificent job. But he was not a Yisrael permanently. Because in order to be Yisrael, the main thing that God wants is not that you should do the will of God, but you need to pass it on to your children. And that's what God says. L'man yitzava is born of Achrov. You see, in other words, because I know that Avraham Avinu is going to command his children to also observe the will of God. And therefore, right, that's the main idea that God wants. Not only that you should do the mitzvahs, but that you need to pass it on as a well, I wouldn't use the word tradition, but you need to pass on this belief and this avodah, work, task to your children. It's critical, obviously, because God wants this to pass down to all mankind, the whole history. And Avraham Avinu did that. He, of course, Yitzchak was an Avraham Avinu was an Av, patriarch. Yitzchak was an Av, and also Yaakov is an Av. You see? So Avraham Avinu succeeded in passing on the law, the mitzvahs of God, the will of God, through 3 generations. This is what happened. In fact, we find that if you recall when we say Hoidu, in the morning by Shachris, there's a very interesting verse, pasuk, which says, Ashekoras es Avraham, who made a covenant with Abraham, ushvu osoi li Yitzchak, and he maintained his oath, which he promised Avraham Avinu about his children, to Yitzchak, vayamideo li Yaakov, and he established it with Yaakov. You see, therefore, what we see is therefore that it requires the passage of the mitzvahs of God, whatever, for 3 generations. And then, if the 3rd generation also observes the mitzvah of God, then that 3rd generation, Yaakov, he will now become a permanent Israel. So this is a very important concept to know. What happened? Well, Yaakov has a brother, as Esau, and the job of Tikkun is now given to both Yaakov and Esau, because they're really both patriarchs, which I had dwelt on previous shurim and so on. They're both patriarchs. What's the difference? The job of Esau was to contend with evil, to go into the world, and that's why he's called an ish sodeh, a man of the field. What does that mean? That he would go into the world, right, and he would resist the temptations of evil. And therefore, he would subdue evil. That's what he would do. That was his job. The job of Yaakov Avinu was is to bring down Kiddusha, to bring down holiness. So one has to contend with evil, right? And the other one has to bring down holiness. In the language of the Ramchal, the job of Esau would be Kfir Surah, to subdue evil, Tachas Kiddusha, underneath holiness. That's his job. And the job of Yaakov would be what's called his Pashtus Kiddusha, to expand the concept of holiness. This is what would happen. And that was the original intent. However, we know that, of course, Esau failed. He was a patriarch that failed, which is devastating and enormously catastrophic for the entire universe. Because the neshama of an Ov, the power of a person who has the soul of a patriarch, is enormous. He's connected to so many different places in the spiritual realms. And if he sins, then he could destroy an enormous amount of places. And if he succeeds, then he brings down the light in those spiritual domains down to the earth. And that's the whole process of tikkun. Now, Asa failed, that we know. So if that's the case, there's now a problem. What is the problem? The problem is somebody has to take over the job of Esau. Because there are 4 patriarchs, Yaakov and Esau. Esau fails, but who's going to do his job? The job has to be done. This concept of subduing evil must be picked up by somebody, you see. Who picked it up? So the answer is Yaakov Avinu. He went piggyback. In other words, not only he had his own job of bringing down holiness, he now had another job, which is the job of Esau. It's called a fill-in, right? To also subdue evil. And that is why after Yitzchak gave the blessings to Yaakov, we know that, he was 63 years old, okay? Therefore, what he was really giving him the blessings was the blessings of the job of Esau. So now Yaakov, because he received those blessings, and he now took over that task of Esau, he now had to go from his base medrash, so to speak, right? He had to go into the world, and therefore he had to go to Lavan, the house of Lavan, and there was plenty of evil in that place. And besides, Choron, he really had to go into the whole world, because he took over the job of Esau. That's what he did. So he went to Lavan, and he stayed there for many, many years, and so on. In any case, after he finishes, what happens? He goes and leaves the house of Lavan. And he encounters an individual who turned out to be a Malach. The famous battle between Yaakov and the Malach. Who's the Malach? The Malach is the angel of Esau. That's who it was. Who is the Malach of Esau? The Satan. He himself, as I say in Hebrew, the angel, the guardian angel of Esau is the Satan himself. He didn't assign it. Because the job of Esau really was to destroy the Satan. Because the neshama of Esau was connected to the neshama, or not the neshama, the neshama of Esau was connected to the shurish, the root of the Satan himself. And therefore, if Esau would remain righteous in the face of evil, then he would weaken the power of the Satan, okay? And as a result of that, he could destroy the Satan. A patriarch could destroy the Satan. And Esau could do it, had he really, remained righteous and so on. But he didn't. So now Yaakov encounters a man, Vayavik ish imoy, and he encounters a man. Who's this man? It's a Satan. Question is, why is it called a man? Why is a Satan called a man? Well, there's a lot of commentaries that ask, what in the world is the battle? You can't fight with an angel. It's impossible. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's no contest here. So what does it mean that Yaakov fought with Esau, or with the Malach of Esau, who's a Satan? You can't fight with the Satan. We all know that, because he's the angel of death. And that's his expertise. So there are commentaries, of course, that try to struggle with this, because it's a very profound question. And not only that, why is he called Ish? Why is he called a man? It should say Vayovik Malach Imoi, and a Malach fought with him, whatever that means. So there is one commentary called the Sepuno, which is very interesting. And he alludes to a profound understanding of what the difficulty was. Yaakov didn't fight with a Malach at that moment. He didn't know it was a Malach. He didn't fight with anybody. Who did he fight with? Himself. When the Satan, who is the Satan? He's Yetzer Hara. He's got 3 jobs. The one job is called the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara is somebody in you that is trying to tempt you to do sin, right? That's the Yetzer Hara. And then he's also called the Satan, which means he's the adversary. He's the heavenly district attorney, tries to prosecute you if you sin. And he's also called the Malach HaMavos. He's not that he kills you necessarily, but he's also responsible to execute the judgment, you see. But when he enters your mind, so to speak, and he tries to tempt you to sin, he's called the Yetzer Hara. He's also called Ish, because now he's in you. You're not fighting an entity that's outside of you. You're now dealing with your own thoughts, your own temptation. So Yaakov fought the Yetzer Hara. But it wasn't just the regular Yetzer Hara. it was the Yetzer Hara that was incredibly powerful, because the job of Esav was to fight the Yetzer Hara as a full-blown, mind-boggling temptation. He didn't have our Yetzer Hara, which we basically contend with, you know, and it's very hard for us to beat our Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara of Esav was beyond imagination, but Esav had the ability to destroy him, without getting into the whole story, because Esav had an incredible personality, very strong, you know. But Yaakov now had to prove that he could do the job of Esav, you see. So the Sultan appears to him as the Yetzer Hara, okay, in his mind, and tries to convince him about something. What was the conflict? The conflict is the exact idea of who Yaakov is. Yaakov excelled in humility, you see. That's what Yaakov excelled. It was an ish tam, yoshiv echolim. But when Yaakov says, "Kotointi mikol chasodim," you know, who am I? Nobody. I don't deserve all the great chesed that you did for me. Yaakov excelled in humility. So therefore, what was the temptation? Gaiva, arrogance. Because what Yaakov had done was incredible. What had he done? He goes to Lavan, takes over the job of Esav, okay? And believe me, Lavan is one of the most wily individuals you can ever encounter. We know that. He's a very evil person, whatever. And, you know, it's just amazing how you can survive in that environment and remain righteous. But Yaakov did it. So one, Yaakov beat Lavan at his game. Two, not only that, he took the job of Esav and he did it, where Esav failed, you see. And that, by the way, there's so much that this answers, but one of them is when Yaakov finds out that he's going to meet Esav, so he tries to send an argument to Esav why Esav shouldn't kill him. So he says, "I'm Lavan Garti, I lived with Lavan." So Rashi says Garti is the same letters as Taryag. So what Yaakov was saying is, hey, I observed the 613 commandments. You didn't, you know, which is a very bizarre way of saying what? You know, what do you mean I observed the 613 commandments, you know? You think Esav cares what you observed? But what he was saying is that your job was to observe the 613 commandments in the house, right? And vanquish the Satan. I did it. I was in the house of Lavan, and I really, just like you should have done, I did it. I observed 613 commandments, and therefore I was successful in what your job had to be. That was his argument, you see. Also, why would you tell a guy who's a mafia guy, I observed 613 commandments, does that mean he doesn't want to kill you? Of course he wants to kill you. But the argument to Esav was different. You know, you're angry at me because I took the blessings, right? But wait a minute, I did what you should have done, which is to observe the 613 commandments and destroy the Satan. I did it. So therefore, here's what Yaakov felt. One, Yaakov beat Lavan at his game. He remained righteous, right, which is an enormous task. Second thing he did, he took over Esav's job and he beat Esav, you see. And the third thing, because of that, Yaakov Avinu had 12 tribes, which is the whole Klal Yisrael. So he's able to bring down the 12 tribes, the 12 Neshamas of Klal Yisrael, you see. And that is the beginning of the Jewish people. But that's an incredible achievement. And not only did that bring down the 12 tribes, he brought down the shirish of the Mashiach ben Yosef, Yosef HaTzadik, because that's the root soul of the Mashiach ben Yosef. And he brought down Yehuda, which is the root soul of Mashiach ben David. You see, what an accomplishment. That's something that it's very hard to believe how somebody could do that, you see. So therefore, Yaakov is coming home from Lavan, right? And he's got all this done. What an incredible spiritual achievement. What happens? He sits down, right? And he's thinking, wow, it's incredible what I did. And all of a sudden he's got to contend, hey, I must be special. I'm great. I'm incredible. You see, Gaiva. All of a sudden the Satan enters him as a Yetzer Hara and starts telling him, do you know who you are? You are magnificent. You see, you're incredible. You know, you should get up and take a bow. And the whole creation has to bow before you because you've accomplished what? You've accomplished the purpose of creation. You brought the Jewish people into existence. So imagine Yaakov is sitting there, he's got to fight his temptation to be about Gaiva. That's Vayeovet Ishimoy. But of course, the one who is prompting him to do that is the Satan himself, you see. Because the Satan is trying to destroy him, you see. So he's hoping that he'll fail, that Yaakov will say, you know, right, you know, true, I'm a magnificent guy. I'm incredible. I'm God's gift to the world, you see. And that's gaiva. And you're not supposed to think that way. The way you are supposed to think is how great, I'm so happy that I was able to make God happy. I'm a nobody. Like Moshe Rabbeinu says in last week's parsha, "V'nachnu mo." What am I? Nothing. That's what a tzaddik has to think that way. I'm a nobody. But how great I feel for doing the work of God, the Ratzon HaBorei, the will of God, right? And bringing what's called a tremendous nachas ruach, a tremendous feeling of satisfaction to God. That's the whole purpose. That's the real avodah. Instead, what he's thinking at, I'm incredible, I'm magnificent. You see? Wrong thought. You see? And this was the moment that he really had to fight the Satan by himself. And he's doing it all night long, you see. And then all of a sudden, as the day enters, guess what? The Satan pops out of his mind, so to speak, however it works, and all of a sudden, there he is. He's an angel. And then Yaakov realized exactly what was going on, you see. And Yaakov passed the test. Almost. There was a slight glitch, that he did feel a certain glitch of what's called in Yiddish, zich, eye. And that's why the Satan was able to hit him in his hip. Because there was a slight failure, you know, and that's what the Medrash says this, you know. In any case, but by and large, Yaakov succeeded 99%, you see. So all of a sudden the Malach appears to him. And Yaakov is, and since Yaakov did it, he's controlling the Satan. He won, you see. And so the Satan says, "Let me go, because I have to go. It's daybreak, and I have to go and sing Shira to God." Even the Satan sings Shira to God, you know. So Yaakov, of course, says, "Oh no, not so quick. You need to bless me." You see, that's what he says to Yaakov. So of course the Satan has no choice. So he gives Yaakov a bracha. But you don't find he blessed Yaakov at all. What he did say is that your name shall no longer be called Yaakov, it will be called Yisrael. That is the greatest blessing of all. What is a blessing really? When you walk over and when you say to yourself, you know, I've been blessed, what are you really saying? Or when you walk over to somebody else and you say, I would like to bless you. What does that mean, bless? What that really means, when you say, I've been blessed, what you're really saying is, I've been the recipient of good. That's what it means to be blessed. When you say to another guy, you know, I want to bless you, what you're really saying is that I wish that you will be the recipient of incredible goodness. That's what a blessing is. And that's what you really say when you say it about yourself. You see? So what the Malach told Yaakov was a blessing. Why? Because the job which Yaakov did by beating the Satan and withstanding gaiva, arrogance, and remaining humble, was the finale of the job of Esav. If that's the case, and the 3 generations went by with the tradition, right, the doctrine of Judaism remained with Avraham, Avinu, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and therefore the Malach said, you therefore are now permanently Yisrael. What a blessing. That means you and your descendants are the only ones that can do the tikkun. That was the blessing. And as a result of that, you will be privy to the blessings of Avraham. And in you will be blessed all the nations of the world, earth. Why? Because all blessing comes from tikkun. Because when you do a tikkun, when you rectify creation, and you bring God back, what happens? Right? Then all of a sudden, the enormous spiritual energy, force of God comes, the light, and all mankind is blessed. Because that's the essence of all blessing, is the presence of God. So the tikkun is to bring it back, and therefore all mankind is blessed. So essentially he's giving Yaakov the blessings of Avraham. You see? You can't get a greater blessing than that. That means Yaakov had the ability to bless anybody. You see? And the Malach told him, the Satan, well, what an admission from the Satan, who's the angel of Esau, that he tells to Yaakov, you are the Masakin. And therefore, the concept of Yisrael, which if you remember I said was the idea of Adam Rishon, a Jew, any being, any human being that can do the tikkun is called Israel, right? You are now permanent Israel. So he did bless him. That's what the Malach did, because he had completed the job of Esav, and that's why it says right after that, Vayovo Yaakov Shalem. And Yaakov went Shalem, complete. What do you mean complete? Because he had done the job of Esav and withstood the Malach. Okay. And the fight now, you understand what the real contest was, is the Yetzer Hara in terms of arrogance or humility. In any case, that's very important, very important. Now, as you will see, because this has profound significance, as we will see, on Mike Pence. So whet your appetites. Now, what happens next? Then Yaakov goes and he meets Esav, right? And what does Esav say? It's astounding. The guy's coming to kill him with 400 men. Instead he says, 1, Ochi, my brother. 2, he kisses him. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that was a real kiss, right? And the third thing he says, not just he kisses him, right? He says, let that which is yours be yours. And Rashi says, Mikan, from here, he admitted that the blessings are Yaakov's. Wow, what a reversal of Esav. And what that means, what's called, indicates or foretells that Esav is right about to do tshuva. And I mentioned this in the last year, that Esav is about to do tshuva. You see, why? Because Yaakov should have realized that if I won over his angel, then the bond between his angel, which is a sultan, and Esav is enormously diminished. And therefore he's ready to do tshuva. Very important idea. Okay. What does tshuva mean? I had mentioned what tshuva means, right? Tshuva has 3 ideas. 1, you need to have vidoy. You have to admit you sinned. If you don't admit you sinned, right, then you can't repent on something you haven't admitted, right? The second aspect of tshuva, right, is not just admission, but regret. I regret I sinned. I admit I sinned, and I regret. That's number 2. The third aspect of sin, in many ways, is very, very important, is what's called Kabbalah ala Osid. You have to say, I'm not going to do it again. You see? By the way, of these 3, which is the greatest, it's interesting to think, is the vidoy, the confession, is it the regret, or is it the Kabbalah ala Osid? So probably everybody would say it's the Kabbalah Osid. You see? But the Chavetz Chaim says, interesting, in the Shmir Saloshim, that the regret is the greatest. Because many times we accept, we say to ourselves, we won't do it again. Guess what? We do it again, and again, and again. You see? So what God wants is, okay, you admit it, but what I really want, you need to regret what you did. That's what he really wants. Kabbalah said, hopefully you'll be able to change your ways. But the main consciousness a person has to say is, I'm sorry, I regret that I ever did this, and I rebelled against the will of God. Anyway, so therefore, what do we find Esav? Did he do any of this? Okay, that's the question. Because we know that Esav in the end will change and will do tshuva. Great. Enter Trump. Trump really is, in many ways, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to get into the whole thing I said last week, but in many ways, Trump, his job is to purify Esav, the Toiv Shebe Esav. Because Esav has a good part and he has a very evil part. The good part of Esav is America. I'm skipping a lot of stuff. You have to go back to the previous year and so on and so forth, you see. Because, well, maybe I'll just say this. Esav became Edom, and Edom became Rome. Rome became Western Christianity, and Christianity became Western civilization. Western civilization is Esav. That's the modern day format of Esav. But Esav had 3 characteristics. One characteristic is what? Is that he was incredibly evil in the sense that an unbelievable bagaiva, arrogant. The second aspect of Esav is not just his arrogance, but also he's a fraud. And the third aspect of Esav is incredibly into pleasure. So therefore, Western civilization is divided into three areas, three countries, three areas. The gaiva, the arrogance of Esav, is Russia. Because Russia is the Russian Orthodox Church, okay? And for 70 years they were communists, which is complete atheism. That's an unbelievable arrogance. And it's interesting that the aspect of Esav, which is arrogance, is so dangerous that God would only allow it to survive communism for 70 years. The second aspect of Esav, which is a fraud, is an imposter, is Europe. Because Europe is an imposter. You know, they preach peace and love and all that. More people have been killed in the name of Christianity than all wars combined. So much for their peace, religion of peace. The third idea, pleasure, well, we know what the pleasure is. It's America. America is the pleasure aspect of Esav, and it's also what's called the Tosh of Esav. It's a good part of Esav. And the job, really, in the end, for Esav to do tshuva, the job is really for Trump to retire America, is to purify America and turn it from bad to good. And there is an evil aspect of Esav, and they're being destroyed. If you take a look who the evil aspect of Esav is, you know, especially now, the government, the corruption of the American government, you know, and all the people who are not interested in helping the people of America, they're just interested, right, in getting elected again. And I have to say, the Clintons are part of the evil of America, and they have been destroyed, almost, but they have completely been discarded. That's why the Muslims are so, and this is going to continue. There's been a whole scandal in Washington and so on. That's about to burst anyway. But in any case, that will really destroy the evil of America. But Trump wants to be Matar America. Okay, and that's what he's doing. So, what do we do? Well, if that's the case, then we need to have certain things that Trump has to do. He has to admit that we were wrong, right? Not only that, and then he has to regret it, and then he has to say, you know, I'm Kabbalah Hosed. I accept now, on the future, that what? That we won't do this to you anymore. You see. And believe it or not, that's exactly what Trump's been doing, as I mentioned last time. Declared the capital of Israel to be Jerusalem. So he's saying, hey, it's yours. Now, if Jerusalem is the capital, then obviously Israel is the land of Israel. I can't have capital on a land. So he's admitting also that that Israel belongs to the Jews, you see. Not only that, he went to the Kessin, put in a tefillin, which I had mentioned, right? So he's meaning that the God of Israel is the supreme God, right? And then he made a whole Hanukkah party, right? Where he's saying Hanukkah is all about the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash, and he spoke very beautifully, right? So he's admitting that the Beis HaMikdash existed, and the Beis HaMikdash is legitimate, and it's real, and it's the Jews, right? Then I mentioned Rubashkini freeze, and he admitted to, and that was a universal admission that we wronged you, Rubashkin, right? The DOJ, the Department of Justice, wronged you, so therefore I admit that we have wronged you for 2,000 years, you see? But he has not blessed Israel. The Malach did, right? The Malach of Esav has blessed the Jewish people, didn't Yaakov Avinu. And therefore we now come to Pence. Pence has finalized, in many ways, the tshuva of Esav had done. And that's the incredible thing that Pence has done. In other words, what they are doing, what Trump and Pence is reiterating that, is they are changing, as I had mentioned, the job of Esav, which originally was Yahweh to serve Yaakov, and became Yahweh to oppress Yaakov. They are now reversing the Yahweh to oppress Yaakov back into Yahweh, where they are going to serve Yaakov. And this is really what's happening. And therefore, what I just want to do is just read a little of his speech, because it's astounding. When you look at this context, remember, Esav, a.k.a. America, a.k.a. also known as Trump, right? And so on, the whole government. When you hear Trump, Pence's speech, it's astounding of what they are admitting. And we're talking about the government. You know, this is the United States. So I'm going to just take some of the ideas because it's worthwhile to understand within this context. It is deeply humbling, this is from Amodia, it is deeply humbling for me to stand before this vibrant democracy. Humbling? The United States has 350 million people. It is the greatest nation on earth. And he's the vice president. And he is saying, humbling? Well, what's that supposed to mean? Just look at the language. It doesn't make sense. And he's talking to the Knesset, right? The Knesset? Knesset is what? Is the parliament body of 8 million people. Right? That's all it is. So this guy of 350 million people, the most powerful nation on earth, is humbling to stand in front of Knesset? What is it, 120 guys? They don't even wear ties. Right? You know what I'm saying? And they always scream at each other. You ever walk into the Knesset? It's like, you know, and he's like, what is he saying? So it's deeply humbling for me to stand before this vibrant democracy, to have the great honor to address the Knesset. Come on. You think Putin would have said this? The first vice president of the United States to be afforded the privilege here in Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. Wow, what an admission. It's astounding. You have to understand what this is. This is Edom. This is the people, right? This is Christianity, Western cities, that has killed 2,000 years of Jews, right? And this guy is standing up saying this? And I bring greetings from a leader who has done more to bring our two great countries closer together. Great countries? Israel is a great country compared to the United States? Like, what is he saying? Yes, because Israel is a great country. Not because of the fact that it's a leader in many ways. He didn't understand that. It's a great country because the entire creation stands on the back of the Jews, because they are the Masakin. He's prophesying without knowing that he's prophesying. That's really what's happening here. And it's going to be continuous. Closer together than any president in the past 70 years. The 45th president of the United States, America, President Donald Trump. Okay. Then thanks to the president's leadership, the alliance between our countries, two countries, have never been stronger, and the friendship between our people has never been deeper. Now he says, and I'm here to convey a simple message from the heart, very important word, of the American people. America stands with Israel. What has he just done? I don't know if he realized that. But by saying from the heart, that means it's emes, what I'm saying. It's not a political strategy to look good in front of the Knesset, you know? It's emes l'dova. And not only that, from the heart of the American people. In other words, it's not just me. It's the American people, which means that the Tahara is on the entire America, not just on me. It's not I that only regret, it's all America that regrets what we did. And therefore, what he has done unwittingly is include the American people in the assisting the Jewish people to do the tikkun, so the entire America will be rewarded. That's what he has done. Unwittingly, that's what he's done. And then, of course, he says, we stand with Israel because your cause is our cause. What is he saying? What is the cause of the Jews? The cause of the Jews is bring the tikkun, right? It's our cause because we are now going to assist you. He is prophesying without understanding the meaning of the real meaning of the words. Your values are our values, of course. Because what's the value of the Jew? To do the will of God. And that's our value. And your fight is our fight, to fight the Satan. I'm laying in meaning which he clearly does not intend. But what I'm saying is like many times we find the Rashi says that he's prophesying and he doesn't even realize it's a prophecy. That the meaning of what he's saying is much deeper than what he thinks. And he continues, in the story of the Jews, where we've always seen the story of America, what a comparison. That he's comparing the story of America to the story of the Jews. It is a story of the Exodus. Great, he believes in the Bible, which I know he does. It's a journey from persecution to freedom, a story that shows the power of faith and promise of hope. Yeah. And then he begins something interesting. He's saying, you know, it's not only we're similar, my country is based on you. It's incredible. My whole country is based on you. My country's very first settlers also saw themselves as pilgrims, sent by Providence, who of course was God, to build a new promised land. Now, the songs and stories of the people of Israel were their anthems. That's what they relied on. Judaism is what they relied on. See, so what he's giving is an incredible historical validity to the Jewish people of antiquity, that even America is based on the stories and which of course means the Torah. And they faithfully taught them to their children, and to do that to this day. And then he says, and our founders, as others have said, turn to the wisdom of the Hebrew Bible, right? For direction, which is purpose, guidance, which is strategy, and inspiration, chizuk. It's incredible what he's saying. He says, the whole concept of America is Jewish. It's Jewish, that's really what it is. He's saying our founding fathers, who, you know, you have to think about what this guy is saying, that he does not realize the emissary of what he's saying. And then he says, America's first president, George Washington, wrote with favor to the children of the stock of Abraham. But the next quote is incredible. Our second president, John Adams, declared that the Jews, in his words, have done more to civilize man than any other nation. Wow, what a statement. What a credit, you see. And your story inspired my forebears, you see, to create what the 16th president calls New Birth of Freedom, which of course he's referring to Lincoln, you know. And down through the generations, the American people became fierce advocates of the Jewish people's aspiration to return to the land of your forefathers. What does Abbas say? Israel's not yours, right? Arafat said there was no such thing as a temple. And he's saying, you're forth to the land of your forefathers. Of course it was yours. There's no denial. Every statement he said is a rebuttal of what the Arabs have been saying. And then it's interesting. Then he says, the Jewish people have held fast to a promise through all the ages, written so long ago. What? It's a pasuk in Chumash that God says, and he's quoting God, even if you have been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, which God says, right? From there, God will gather you and bring you back to the land which your fathers possessed. Israel is yours, historically and biblically. That's a complete refutation of the Arabs and their claim, which is beyond belief, what he's saying. You know. And by the way, he says, and then he goes something, he says something which I think he got a standing ovation for, you know. He said that, as the state of Israel celebrates the 70th anniversary of its birth. By the way, this is the 70th year that it was declared a nation, you know? And then he said something which I think knocked everybody out. As you prepare to commemorate this historic milestone, I say along with the good people of Israel, here and around the world, Shechionu v'kimonu b'yon lazman hazeh. Excuse me. You know, what is this? Could you imagine Asaph saying, Shechionu v'kimonu b'yon lazman hazeh? I mean, like, you know, you have to pinch yourself to make sure you're awake, you know? To make sure, you know, it's like, what is this? Asaph is giving a bracha on who? That the Jews should say, Shechionu, who kept us alive, v'kimonu, right? And has made us exist, right? V'kimonu has made us reach Zman hazeh. I mean, what is that? That's incredible. Remember, this is Asaph or Edom, the Toiv Sheba Asaph, the good part of Edom saying this. Talk about an admission, right? Talk about a regret. This is unheard of in American history. Then he says the U.S. was the first nation to recognize Israel, and so on. And then, of course, no other administration wanted to recognize you. They wanted to, because they never made Jerusalem to be the capital. But we said this is all false. It's all sheker, right? Of course. And it says that Donald Trump made history by recognizing the capital of Israel as Jerusalem. And this is interesting. He righted a 70-year wrong. He kept his word to the American people. The American people. He's giving credit to the American people, which is very important, and therefore they are entitled to the reward that they will get for assisting the Jews. Each word is very important. But I love the fact that he righted the 70-year wrong. What do you mean wrong? The only thing that's right is the interest of nations. Everything else is irrelevant. So what he's saying, of course, why did the presidents before that never acknowledge Jerusalem as a capital? For one reason, because it was in their self-interest not to do it. I can understand that, because they wanted to curry favor with the Arabs, get the oil, right? And therefore, they didn't want to recognize, because they felt that they do, that's the end of peace, whatever. So here it says that it still was wrong, because righteousness precedes personal or political interest. You don't realize what this statement is, because all nations would say, what's right? My self-interest is right. You see? Well, you want to call it politically correct, whatever. But he's saying that even though they had their cheshbonis, as they say, they had their reasons, right? It was still wrong. Because what he's saying is, which is an incredible statement of tzidkus, righteousness, that righteousness is greater than political interest. That's what he's saying. Do you ever hear President anybody say that? You have to read this and understand what this man is saying. Then, of course, he says, the Jewish people's unbreakable bond to the sacred Trinity reaches back more than 3,000 years ago. What an admission of historical, right, evidence. It was here in Jerusalem, on Mount Moriah, that Abraham offered his son, right, Isaac, and was credited with righteousness for his faith in God. The Arabs hold, right, that Avram sacrificed Ishmael in Mecca, right? And here's the President of the United States saying, of course not, right? It was Avram that offered Yitzchak, Mamshan HaMoriah. I mean, talk about historical validity, it's incredible. This is also, our president made a decision, in his words, in the best interest of the United States. Not in the best interest of who? Of political correctness, or the best interest, we did it because we want to curry favor with Israel. No, because this is the best interest of the United States. What is the interest? Righteousness and honesty. That's what he's saying, because that was the interest. What are the interests? In fact, it's almost incredible that they even did it, because he knew that if he recognizes Israel, Jerusalem as the capital, what's going to happen? Then the Abbas is going to, of course, walk out. So really what he did is the truth won over the fear that he won't be able to make peace with Abbas. And then he says, which is interesting, the winds of change can already be witnessed across the Middle East. Long-standing enemies are becoming partners. Arabia, Saudi Arabia, right? Old foes are finding new ground for cooperation. And the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael are coming together in common cause as never before. Of course, because that's the truth of Ishmael. He is commenting on something which is not only that America does tshuva, but even Ishmael does tshuva. But he recognizes it as something that has never happened before, you see. Then he mentions nearly 4,000 years ago, a man left his home in Ur of the Chaldees, Avram, right, to travel here to Israel, and so on. And he mentions here he had no crown and so on. Yet to him was this promised descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, you see. And he keeps going on and on about this. Abraham's promised land. And then, of course, he says that what Israel has done is beyond belief. The growth of Israel. But in the end, he says these ideas. May God bless the Jewish people. That's the malach of Esav blessing the Jewish people. That finishes off the job, you see? So not only has he admitted repeatedly, that we were wrong, we sinned, we brutalized you as part of what mankind did to you, but in the end, what you need to realize also is what? Is that I will bless you, which is unheard of. This happened in Shvat, you see. Now, I'm going to go through one more event, and then you'll understand why all of this has to happen in Shvat, Tu B'Shvat. You see, this is living evidence of what Tu B'Shvat is. The second incident is also defies. You have to hear this. Netanyahu went to India, you see. So they asked, Hamodi has a military correspondent, his name is Ape. Okay? So they asked him, how'd you like it? What do you think happened? So they asked him, you accompanied Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on his trip to India last week. What struck you the most about the visit? Listen carefully what happened in India, and then I will explain why. The warmth, both on a personal level between Netanyahu and his host Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I think you can pronounce it Modi, I'm not sure which way you pronounce it. Let's just say Modi, and between the people of India and Netanyahu as the leader of, in other words, what struck him was the warmth on a personal level between Netanyahu and his host Prime Minister Modi, and between the people of India and Netanyahu as the leader of Israel. What struck him amazing was the warmth, not just between Netanyahu and Modi, but between Netanyahu as the leader of Israel and the Indian people. What does that mean? Here's one example. In his 4 years in office, Modi has hosted dozens of foreign leaders, and the protocol is to send a minister to the airport to greet them on their arrival, which makes sense. He's broken protocol. How? And come to the airport himself only twice for the presidents of the United States and China. Last week, he surprised Netanyahu when he showed up himself to greet Netanyahu, treating Israel the way he treats the superpowers. This makes no sense. I mean, he never did that. You send a minister, finish, But Modi himself came to greet Netanyahu the same way he greeted America and China, the world's superpowers. Why? That's incredible. And Israel, what is Israel really? It's an 8 million people, whatever, 8.5 million people. I mean, it's a dot on the map. You know what I'm saying? So he actually comes. What does this mean? And if you think that happened, wait. This gesture set the tone of the visit. Modi was at Netanyahu's side practically throughout the week-long visit. You couldn't miss the chemistry that exists between the two. You should know, when you look at these two, they look like long-lost brothers about to hug each other. But what is that supposed to mean? And not only that, Prime Minister's a busy guy. Why would he hang around with Netanyahu the whole week? You see? All he is the Prime Minister of Israel. That's all he is. So why are you doing this? But now, here's what he says. So that's the relationship between Modi and Netanyahu, which is beyond comprehension. Never happened before. But the extraordinary warmth also came from the people of India. Listen to this. I saw hundreds of thousands of people line the streets for 5 miles to greet Netanyahu. Can you imagine what that is? No. Imagine you come to India, right, and you're going to New Delhi, right? And for 5 miles, it's filled with Indian people, right, to greet you. How would you feel? It's incredible. And it was unbelievable. They'd never seen anything like that. 5 miles, hundreds of thousands of Indians were there to greet him. Young and old gave up time from work or school and dressed up in their finest to pay tribute to an Israeli leader? What is it, because of trade or economy? This makes no sense. You see, they never did that to anybody else. Now, and I'll read this last piece. The newspapers in India described Netanyahu's welcome as regal. Remember, it's a little country called Israel. That's all it is. Now this is astonishing. Most of the media in the capital of Delhi went even further, commenting that no other leader, regardless of the size of his country, had received the kind of warm greeting that Netanyahu got last week. It is unheard of in Indian history. What is going on here, right? What does this mean? Just because Israel can sell them missiles? You see? So, does that mean they line up the people? What do they have to do with the missiles? They line up for 5 miles? The question is, what does that really mean and why? And the question also is, who is India? For that, in order to answer that, you need to go back to the Chumash. Avram Avinu, after Sarah died, he married again. Who did he marry? He married Keturah. Okay, who is Keturah? So the Meforshim write, Keturah is Hagar. He married Hagar, which is the first time, he married her, remember, then because of Sarah, they chased Hagar out because Yishmael was trying to kill Yitzchak and so on. Apparently, after Sarah died, he remarried her, okay? So it says there, now, in the Chumash, what it says there is that, what did he do? He gave everything that he owned to Yitzchak. And what he did is he gave to the sons of the concubines, and the Torah lists a whole bunch of children that came out of him and Hagar, okay? And then it says that he gave everything to Yitzchak, because Yitzchak was the main idea, but to Hagar's kids he gave matonis, gifts, okay? And it says that to the children of the concubines of Avram. So the Zohar says a remarkable statement, the Zohar Chodosh. The Zohar says that what that means, since the Torah is ascribing the children of Hagar again to Avram, that each of these kids had a nitzotzoi, a spark of the kedusha of Avram Avinu. They were not Jews, because a Jew is from Yitzchak and Yaakov, but they were all bnei Avram. And not only that, but they had a certain spark of kedusha from Avram Avinu that went into each of the kids of the production. That's a very important concept. So we're not looking here regular goy, non-Gentile. We're looking at children of Avram Avinu that had a certain kedusha of Avram Avinu. It's called a nitzotz, a spark of Avram Avinu, and that's what the Zohar says. Rashi says, what were the gifts that he gave to these kids? Right? What were the gifts? So the Rashi said, Shem Tumah, a name of Tumah. Shem means a sort of like a, what's the English word for it? To call it a divine name of Tumah. Now, why would he do that? Why would Avram Avinu give a name of God, so to speak, of impurity to his kids? We know Avram Avinu did everything he could for everybody to make them religious. So to his own kids, he's going to give what? A divine name of defilement? No. What he gave them was a Shem Tumah that protected them from Tumah. There are divine names that when you meditate on will protect you from defilement. That's what he gave them. But what's interesting is when you do that, you need to meditate. He taught them the science of meditation. And since the whole concept what he gave them was divine names of Tumah, clearly he taught them the whole theoretical structure of spirituality, because that's what divine name of Tumah means. So it comes out that these kids of his, right, that they had an incredible spiritual inheritance from Avram Avinu, and the way they could protect themselves from Tumah. Why? Because he knew he was going to send them out, which he did, which I will bring down. He knew that they could be influenced by Avodah Zarah, and the way to protect themselves was through a divine name that they can meditate on and protect themselves. But what you see is that these kids had what? They had an incredible grounding in spirituality, because we're talking about a mechanism to prevent themselves from being, Avodah Zarah, you see? And the whole concept of meditation. Then it says in the Torah, right, that he sent them out. He sent them the direction of east to the land of the east. How far is that? So we know they went east of Israel, because Avram was in Israel. How far is that? And for that, we have to look in the Zohar, where it says Rabbi Aibu. When Rabbi Aibu went out, he went eastward, and he encountered the children of Avram 2,000 years later, the descendants of Avram Avinu from Hagar, the Bnei Hagar, or the Bnei Keturah. He encountered them. See? But he noticed, he said, and he saw that they still had the teachings of Avram, but the problem is that they integrated it with Avodah Zarah. That was the problem, you see. What land, which is very far, because it doesn't say just the east, but it went far east, really, very far eastward. What land is that? That's India. What happened is that they settled in India, you see, and in many ways they took over the culture of India because they had the chokhmah, the wisdom of Avram Avinu. Did you ever notice what the religions of India are? It's Hinduism and so on. In many ways, the religions of India are very spiritual. They're filled with Avodah Zarah, but it's very spiritual. In fact, India is on a much higher level of spirituality than Christianity, if you think about that. The concept of, if you ever get involved in these disciplines of yoga, it's about meditation, it's about knowing the soul and disconnecting the soul from the physical world. In many ways, it's, of course it's not Judaism, but there's very astonishing parallels between the Indian way of understanding the world, the reality, and Judaism. They're very much into what's called the soul, and how the soul goes through an illusion called Maya, and the soul, which is Atman, has to separate itself from that, right? And they do this through meditation. The avodah of those Indians into this is spiritual, you see. But of course, it's complete distortion of the spirituality. But this is Avram Avinu, you see. So what does it come out? It comes out an incredible concept that India is Bnei Avram. The Indians are Bnei Avram. They are the children that came out from Hagar, you see, with the spiritual inheritance of what they have. And therefore, the amazing thing is that, now you look at what happened in Netanyahu, the tshuva, God is bringing back the Bnei Avram, the children of Abraham. One, he's bringing back Esau, Edom, you see, and that's Trump. He's bringing back Ishmael, and that's Saudi Arabia. But what's astonishing is he bringing back the Bnei Keturah. And therefore, the Indians sense that they have a tremendous affinity, you see, with the Jewish people. And therefore, you cannot explain the behavior of Modai. It's almost like they're brothers. And the truth is, when you really think about that, the Bnei Avram, right, that the Bnei Keturah, Avram Avinu was Bnei Keturah is a half-brother to Yitzchak. Same father, different mother. So I believe what's happening is astonishing, is that the Indians, for whatever reason, the Baruch Hashem is waking them up. And see, and what he's doing is that they all of a sudden have this incredible feeling about Jewish people, you see. And it's not just Mordai with Netanyahu, it's Indian people. Why else would they line up for 5 miles? It would have nothing to do with Israel, really. To do what? Because there's something in the neshama of the Indians that recognize that they have an affinity with Jews, and that they are the Bnei Keturah. So what's happening is all the Bnei Avram is doing tshuva. That's what's happening with India. It's amazing when you think about that. See, and that's how they're connected, you see. And therefore, the joy, it's interesting that the Indians are experiencing a tremendous joy. What's the joy? That they are being reunited in certain ways with their half-brothers. I believe that's what's happening. Because there is no other explanation for what happened last week or the week before. There is no other explanation. And I believe the explanation is completely spiritual. Because they are the Bnei Keturah. All of this happened when? In Shvat. What is Shvat? Now we can get to Tu B'Shvat.
That was the introduction.
Yeah. It's called a practicum. This is really happening in Shvat. We know that there are many forces of evil that dominate the Jewish people throughout the centuries. And I mentioned once that if the Jews deserve to be punished because they sin, then God will assign 8 persecutory agents to do that. The first one is called Egypt. After Egypt, you had Babylon. Then you had Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome, you see. And Rome, we know, is Esau. As I had mentioned, that Esau is Edom, Edom became Rome, Rome became Christianity, Christianity is Western civilization, which is now in 3 parts, you see. Now, so therefore we have Egypt, Babylon, Bavel, we have Persia, Boras, Yovan is Greece, and of course Rome is Edom. 5, you see? And Rome transforms itself several times, as I mentioned. Who are the other 3? The other 3 is who? Is Yishmael, is number 6, okay? Amalek is number 7. And the Erev Rav, which are Jews that want to destroy the uniqueness of the Jewish people in terms of removing the Torah, is number 8. These are the 8 persecutory agents that God assigns if the Jews deserve to be punished. But what's interesting is each one, the power of these individuals has a certain time period. You see, take the time period of Edom, which is Christianity. The month of Teves is the month of Esau. The astronomical sign of Teves is the goat, Capricorn, the goat. And the goat is the sign of the devil. In Greek mythology, the goat is the sign of the devil, you see. But in any case, and what is the major event that occurred in Teves, which comes out basically December, right? It's Christmas, you see. So Teves is considered the month of Esau where he has the power to do what he wants, you see. That power of Esau begins to ebb, wane, with the entrance of Shvat, you see. Now, Shvat, it ends with Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is the termination of the ability of the persecutory agents. It ends by Tu B'Shvat. And Tu B'Shvat, we know, is the blossoming of fruits, right? That's what Tu B'Shvat is. It's when the fruit on the tree begins to blossom. And that, of course, means the blossoming is, there's now fruit, there's now life, right? It's a rebirth. That's what Tu B'Shvat is. And there are many halachas that are connected with Tu B'Shvat, you see. Halachas in terms of Truma and Maisa, you see. But what the significance for us about Tu B'Shvat is because there's a blossoming of the fruit, which is a new rebirth. What that means is that the ability of Esau to afflict the Jewish people begins to end in Shvat, you see. Now there's an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Is it Rosh Chodesh Shvat or is it Tu B'Shvat? It's an argument, you know. So we paskin, we decide according to Beis Hillel. But Beis Shammai is Beis Shammai. So all these events happen in the beginning of Shvat. Why? Because that is the beginning, especially the concept of penance. You see? Because the influence or the ability of Edom to do bad is ending in Shvat. And then lo and behold, Pence comes out and gives this entire speech, you know, which is a complete affirmation of the Jew, his greatness, and his job. And Israel belongs to him, both historically, biblically, politically, etc. And he gives it exactly in Shvat, when the influence of Esau ends, you see. Then what happens? And then from Shvat, that's the beginning. Then Shvat, after Tu B'Shvat, who takes over? Adar. Adar is the month of Joseph, Yosef HaTzadik, you see. And therefore Haman couldn't survive. That's why he was, the Purim, of course, happened in Adar. So Adar is the month of the power of Yosef. So first the termination of the power of Edom, Esau, ends, and that's exactly what happened in these events, right? And then from Tu B'Shvat until the end of Adar, the power of Yosef begins. And the power of Yosef, of course, we know Yosef, his main job was to counter evil, because that's what Yosef did when he went to Egypt. It is to subdue evil. Yosef really was in the job of Esau, because Yaakov could not do the total job of Esau. So Yosef, who was supposed to be a tribe, a Shevet, took over half the job of Esau. And that's why it says, V'hoya beis Yaakov le'esh, the house of Jacob will be for fire, beis Yosef l'hova, the house of Joseph will be a flame, beis Esau l'kash, and therefore the house of Esau will be reduced to stubble. You see, so you need Yaakov and Yosef to vanquish Esau. So therefore, Shvat is the termination of the power, the spiritual power of Esau to afflict the Jews. And that's really what happened with Pence, right? The second thing is Yosef begins to take over, and that's why Purim happened in Adar, because the power of Yosef was to destroy Amalek. You see, so we are now entering a time period when the acceleration of the Messianic process is going to get faster. You see, not only that, and then you enter Nisan, right? Nisan is the redemption. So the concept of redemption means that it's no longer the concept of removing evil, right? Or pollution or contamination. Nisan is the month of redemption, which is the entry, which is the real termination of evil, and it's the entry of Kedusha, holiness. And that goes on until Ir and then Sivan, which is Matan Torah. So what is amazing is that that's what Tu B'Shvat really is. And that's why we celebrate Tu B'Shvat. Because it is the end or the termination of evil forces against the Jewish people. You see, because everything has a time period. Even evil has a time period. You see. And I feel that these incredible events have happened because we are in Shvat. So that is tremendous news for the Jewish people. That we seem to be, I mean, if you look at what's been happening in the last 2 months, it's very hard to believe the acceleration in terms of America and Trump, you know, and what Trump has done, you know, and so on, right? And then you read Pence, you know, I mean, the way it sounds, Pence ought to become Jewish. The way he's spoken about Jews, it's almost like he's wishing he was Jewish, you see. And of course, we know he's an evangelical Christian, and so on. But these events are happening with rapid fire succession. And most people, like, what's happening and why? And the idea to that is because, as I said, we are very rapidly accelerating the Messianic process. That's really what's happening. And as a result of that, we are seeing things which each individual thing in and of itself is incredible, is remarkable. But okay, maybe when you put them all together in the last, year since Trump became president, and especially in the last couple of months, it's very hard to believe that each event stands by itself. What God is doing is accelerating the process, but he's doing it so slowly that people don't realize what's happening. Like he's doing it under the eyes and nose of everybody. But if you look at each event, so you could say, well, maybe this event happened because it happened, even though it never happened before. But when you add them up, just think about that, Trump being president is a nes nigla, because everybody hated the man, which of course they still do. I explained that why, and so, right? So from that time on, this is what's been happening. And I gave a shiur a long time ago, 2.5 years ago, the concept of the tetrad. I don't know if you remember that, the blood moon. If you remember that. You guys remember that?
I remember.
And I gave a shiur, it was 2.5 years ago. What is a tetrad? There's a thing called a blood moon. Blood moon, yeah. Blood moon is when the moon turns red. Not totally red, but it's like orange. Okay? That's a very rare event, you see? But it happens. But when a blood moon occurs, right, and I said this, right? When it occurs 4 times in a row, and not only does it occur 4 times in a row, that's called a tetrad, 4 times, but it occurred, I think it was in the first year was 2014 or 15, it occurred, the moon, you know, the new moon, that's when it occurs, right? It occurred the first night of Pesach, the second moon occurred, second blood moon occurred the first night of Sukkot, then the third blood moon occurred the next Pesach, and the fourth one occurred the next Sukkot. That means every Yom Tov had a blood moon, 4 times. That only occurs once in 500 years. The first time it occurred was in 1992. What happened in 1992? Columbus set sail for America. Remember the Jews were expelled? But that... 1492. Right?
You said 1992.
I said 1992?
I think so, yeah.
You know what I mean? It means I'm tired. Why? And that's, you should know, a redemption, beginning of redemption process. Why? Because the Jews were experiencing tremendous persecutions in Europe. So when he set sail in 1492, Columbus, right, for America, America accepted them. So that's the beginning of the end of the exile. And in 1492, there was a tetrad. And there was a redemptive process. The next one happened in 1948, State of Israel, right? The next one happened in 1967. What was that? Jerusalem, right? And the next one, the fourth one, happened 2 years ago. And I gave a shir then, I said, this is the time, this time, because every time a tetrad happens on the Yom Tovim of Pesach, Sukkot, Pesach and Sukkot, it's not just that it happens, a blood moon happens, and that happens 4 times in a row, but it happens on Yom Tov. You see? And I said that this is also the sign that God is telling us, here comes the redemption. And lo and behold, right after that, Trump is elected, right? Jerusalem becomes the capital, right? Trump goes to the wall, puts a kvittel in, right? He frees Rubashkin, he stands up to the UN, takes away $285 million because of the fact that they're against Israel. You see? Now he wants to defund UNRWA, right? He's taking money, $65 million away from Abbas. I mean, it's like, where are we? Are we in Alice in Wonderland? Like, where are we? This doesn't make sense. You know, it's like, you know, if I ever see Trump, if I ever see him, I'm going to say, when are you going to become Jewish? I mean, what are you, you're doing exactly what really, and that's really what it is. He's a messianic figure, which means that, and I mentioned that, he's a messianic figure for the Jewish people. You see? Of course he's not the Mashiach, because he's a guy. But he is a figure in Esav. You see, he's Esav, the reincarnation in certain, not of Esav, but of Antoninus. In any case, and that was the perfect relationship that Esav and Rabbi had, which I mentioned the last year. And that's what's happening. But it happened with the tetrad. And somebody just told me, and I haven't checked this out, that this Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat is always a full moon, that the moon is going to go into what it does.
The 31st of January.
It's supposed to be what?
It's
On the 31st of January.
this Wednesday.
Which is Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah,
The following is supposed to happen to the moon. A blood moon,
yeah.
a large moon, a super moon.
Super.
Am I right?
Yes.
A super moon, because the moon is going to be closest. Then the next thing,
A blue moon.
a blue moon, and I think there's a fourth thing?
Lunar eclipse.
A lunar eclipse, yeah. That happens once, what? Well, the last time it happened 180 years?
150 years.
150 years ago. And it's happening Tu B'Shvat. Remember, the sign of the Jew is the moon. All of these astounding events in one shot happening to the moon on Tu B'Shvat, which is the end of the shlita of the domination of Esav. Because Esav is doing tshuva, right? What's going to happen on Tu B'Shvat? See? We already see what's happening in the tetrad that happened a couple of years ago. That every time an event happens, it's always what? It's always an acceleration or part of a messianic process. Like, it's hard to believe, you see. And now with Tu B'Shvat, and like I said, the premise of Tu B'Shvat is what? Is that it ends the dominion of Edom in many ways, see? Because Tevis is their month, Shvat is the beginning of the end, Tu B'Shvat ends it, and what takes over is Ben Yosef, Adar, and then Nisan, which is David, Mashiach ben David. You know, so the way things are going, the rapidity is incredible. You see, so we don't even know what's going to be. But when you have to add other things to the mix, as they say. Israel is rising in stature to the nations of the world. We see that. I mean, think about that. The Holocaust ended in 1945. Israel was at the nadir of their stature. Everybody, what? They were being butchered by everybody, sent away, right? And so on, and killed by Hitler and Yamach Shema and so on, right? So how is it possible that what? In about 70 years, Israel is now one of the greatest nations on earth, and everybody knows that. They are world leaders. I mean, this is 8 million people. And the world has over what, 7.5 billion people? Israel is not even 1/4 of the world's population. Yet they have risen in stature enormously. They are world leaders, right? In agriculture, in medicine, water conservation. You see, in so many areas of science, in cybersecurity, computers. It's astonishing, and everybody's running to buy products of Israel. You see, and everybody wants to become their friend. And America will become very prosperous because America is now, of course, Trump shows tremendous prestige to Israel, and everybody's going to want to talk to Israel in order to curry favor with America. We are watching something that has never happened in Jewish history, certainly for 2,000 years. And what is happening, each event has to be understood as a miracle. The problem is, if you see 15 miracles in one shot, you don't believe any of them are a miracle. This is the problem. Even miracles become boring. Think about that, you know? And this is the problem. Miracles are happening on a daily basis, and after a while they become, what else is new? You know, ho-hum, what else is new? But each one is something that never happened before. I mean, just the story of India. You ever hear of that? For what? For a prime minister that trades with India? So you got 5 miles of Indians? Hundreds of thousands of Indians? For what? You see? This is what's happening. And therefore, to us what it means is the redemption is happening, you see. And the whole concept of Trump, which really in many ways started, or actually started before that and so on, this is really what the idea is. So certainly you should look forward to Tu B'Shvat, what's about to happen. And it's going to continue because it seems to be non-stop. You see, and I had mentioned the gematria, which I'll mention again, you know, and it's an incredible gematria. I mentioned that when the Moshe spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu by the snap, by the burning bush, he said, the word he said was, Pokoi Pokadati, I have surely remembered. And I mentioned that there are 2 concepts of redemption. One is when the Mashiach ben Yosef, the real Mashiach, is freed from his prison, without getting into that, from that which obstacles. And the second is, that's called the Pekida. And the second thing is called the Zechira, when the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is removed from its golus, because God restrains himself, and that means God now enters the world completely different. So there's the Pekida, which has been Yosef, and there's the Zechira, which has been David. Fine, okay. And God uses the word in Moshe Rabbeinu, Pokoi Pokadati. You see, in fact, the one who really used that, Moshe, when he came to Egypt, so they didn't know if Moshe Rabbeinu was the Mashiach. So they went to Serach Bas Asher, who was the daughter of Yaakov, and he blessed her that she should have eternal life. And she's one of the few people that entered heaven alive. So they went to her and they said to her, how do we know Moshe Rabbeinu is the guy, the Goya? So she said, if he uses the expression Poko Yivgoid, which is the Pekida, you know, it's God has surely remembered you. So Moshe Rabbeinu, God used the expression Pokoi Pokadati, I have surely remembered. The gematria, the numerical value of Pokoi Pokadati is 778. And what is this year? 778. But here's the problem. Every year, every millennium has a 778, right? 1,778, 2,778, right? So how do I know it means 5,778? And the answer is, because the word pokoi has a vav. Pokoid. But the Vav is not written, it's sounded. So it's called, it's not a ksiv, but it's a kri. So if it's not written, you don't count it as part of the gematria. But since you read it Pokoid, right, then it has to be what's called reckoned in with the concept of the message. And Pokoid, what's read is a Vav. A Vav is 6, which means the 6th millennium, which is 5,000. So the Pokoid Pokadati is 5,778. That's the exact gematria of that word which God used when he talked to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, does that mean this is the year?
Yes.
I mean, just take a look at what's happening, you know? If you're from Mississippi, you know what they say in Mississippi? Show me, Missouri. Show me, right? Show me. It's a non-stop redemption process that it doesn't even stop, you see. So let's hope that gematria, and it's really in many ways, everybody's been trying to figure out when is Mashiach coming for thousands of years. There's always guys trying to figure out when's Mashiach coming, right? They look at Daniel, Daniel, everywhere, right? Wouldn't it be strange and incredible, really a sense of humor, that the year that he comes, which means the freedom of the Mashiach ben Yosef, right, is in the very words that indicate his freedom, Pokoid Pokadati, right? So God will say, hey, I never hid it. I already had it. It's in the word Pokoid Pokadati, which means the redemption itself. Just add up the gematria, you see? But in any case, this is what we are seeing. And Tu B'Shvat is very important because it is the end of the ability of the nations that persecute the Jews to continue to persecute them at that time. And that's when the reign of Ben Yosef comes in. Then you have Mashiach ben Yosef. Then you have Mashiach ben David, right? Then you have the redemption, Matan Torah, which of course is the spiritual redemption itself, and so on. What do? What we have to do is very careful. And I believe what the Rabbi is trying to tell everybody. Why is God doing this? Because what the Rabbi is trying to do, as what he always does, is a tremendous Baal Chesed, incomprehensible mercy and kindness. The Rabbi does he doesn't want to bring the Mashiach and everybody's they'll faint. Why? It's not only going to faint at this guy, but they're going to faint and say, hey, why'd you tell me before this? I would have repented. Right? I would have repented. How do you leave me in the dark like this? You see? So the Moshe, that's the reckoning. So God says, of course they're right. I'm about to bring the end of mankind, right? The beginning of Olam Haba, and I didn't warn them? Of course I warned them in the Torah, right? But I don't really warn them. I'm going to warn them. How? Because I'm going to make miracle after miracle occur. And for those people who really want to change, they will say, this doesn't make sense. I must change. You see? So that's why it's very important to think about these ideas. And that's actually one of the reasons why I try to spread these ideas. Because really these ideas should be concealed. Really. Because it's a matter, when you're revealing ideas like this, the meaning of current events and so on, really they should be concealed. Because then there are always prosecutions by the Satan. But I feel it's a mitzvah to reveal all this. Why? Because to wake people up, to do tshuva. Because I'm telling you, that's what people are going to say. It's not only going to say, wow, the world is over, it's over. They're going to say, why didn't you tell me? That's what they're going to say. And that's going to be a devastating emotion that people are going to feel. That they didn't know that the end was here, right? And they didn't do tshuva. In a certain way, it's not fair. It's true they could have done for thousands of years. But this type of event needs a warning. It needs to alert people what's about to happen. And I believe that's the idea of what the Rosh is trying to do, because he's really trying to shake up mankind. In any case, so let's hope that this year would be the year, and but you have to remember one thing: the main idea of redemption is not political. It's not that Israel, the exile ends where the Jews are no longer persecuted, you see, or the Jews are now the top trading partner in the world. That's not the redemption. The redemption is a return to God. It's an understanding that spirituality is the real reality. You see, it's the concept that Torah is the real document of reality. That Torah is the real gift that the Jewish people have, and that the purpose of a Jew is to become spiritual. It's really the purpose of the whole world, but certainly to the Jew. That's what has to change, not the political realities. That will change, and that's happening now. But there's something missing. What is missing is the rise in consciousness of the Jew, that the Torah is the path toward God. That's still missing, because the Jews are still leaving Judaism. And something will happen with that will change. Something will happen which will bring a tremendous rise in spiritual consciousness. Because that's what God in the end wants. That's the main message that God wants. It's not the political freedom. It is the spiritual awakening of God's people. Thank you. Questions?
One thing, when you mentioned that,
What was that?
you mentioned that the problem of Esau was arrogance, and
Yeah.
Pence mentioned his humility. It
Yes.
was exactly, he was defending Israel at the provocation of the representatives of Yishmael who were just being ejected from the Knesset. That's when he said it.
Yeah, oh, that's when it's,
People were
yeah.
holding up their signs that Jerusalem is the capital, eternal capital of Palestine.
Yeah, oh, that's what they threw him out.
And they threw him out. They
Yeah.
knew that they were going to get thrown out. And
Of course.
they knew also that would make Israel look bad.
Yeah.
And all these Arabs get
Of
thrown out
course.
the Knesset. So Pence turned it upside down and said, wow, I'm humbled
Uh-huh.
to see this expression of Israeli democracy.
Okay.
And a second thing is that, maybe you know this, I mean, people have said that the holy people of India are known as Brahmin. So they say they come from Abram.
You know,
And Saraswati is a goddess.
you know, I have it written here, but I overlooked it.
I figured you probably
You
knew
know,
that.
thanks,
Saraswati
okay,
is a
I
goddess.
gotta say this.
Yeah.
What is a Hindu priest called? Right? It's called a Brahmin.
It's
right?
a caste.
What?
It's a caste.
Yeah, it's a whole caste, I know. If you put an A in front of Brahmin, it is a Brahmin.
And Saraswati is one of the main goddesses. And they have
Who?
Saraswati.
Saraswati?
One of the main goddesses, also education and so on. And of course they have a Magen David.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that go on in India that really smack of Judaism. And that's why, because they're the B'nai Keturah. Thank you for reminding me. I have it written down, but I almost forgot, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
I listened to your 3 lessons on this issue.
My what?
I listened to the last 3 lessons about Esau.
Oh, okay.
And tonight you spoke particularly of Gava,
Gaiva, yes.
and fraud.
And who?
Fraud.
Fraud.
So fraud, we know.
Yes. What do you want to say?
Is Christianity.
Fraud is Christianity. I said that.
But we haven't yet solved this problem. This part of Esau is still,
You mean Europe?
no, Christianity, Catholicism, is still to be clean, needs a tikkun. We passed so much through Christianity, we suffered so much.
But I don't see what you're saying.
I think that there is missing
Yeah?
the tshuva by Christianity.
Well, what you're saying is interesting. However, you have to remember one thing. Christianity, the tshuva of Christianity is when it disappears. A nation does tshuva, not a religion. What I mean, in other words, the concept of tshuva of Christianity is what? When it says we were wrong. There is no Yeshu and so on. There is no Trinity. There's only the God of Israel and there is His Torah. You see? So it's what you're saying is not correct. A religion doesn't do tshuva, it disappears. A nation can do tshuva. And that's what America's doing.
So we're still waiting for the disappearance of...
It is disappearing. You know, in Europe it's disappearing. People don't, 90% of the people in Europe don't go to church.
I come from Italy,
Okay.
and I know how powerful Catholicism is, not only in Italy,
Yeah.
all over Europe, all over France.
But the attendance at the church in Europe is 10%. The only ones who see the churches of Europe are the tourists. 90% of Europe don't go to church anymore. That's the beginning of the disappearance. You see? Takes time, slow. but it is disappearing, yeah. And not only that, but the scandal of the Catholic Church, you remember the scandal, that has done enormous harm to the whole belief of the priests and so on. What you're looking at is the Baruch slowly taking them out because he wants to change, he wants to bring the true religion, which is of course the Torah and the Jewish people as the Masakin. And that's what it says in the Navi, that in the end of time, based tefillah, my house will be a prayer for all nations. And guess what? They'll be praying to God, not to every other religion. You see? That will happen. Yeah. But the tshuva of a religion is its annihilation, its disappearance. That's the difference. Got it? Anyway. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify, because last time I heard you say the same thing, that people hate Trump. You said that before
Yeah.
in your
sure.
shiur.
Yeah.
But really, the majority of people in the United States, they love Trump. And it's the mainstream media that hate them. To clarify, the mainstream media, which is owned by the leftist liberals, but they hate Trump.
Yeah, okay.
But not the majority of the people of the United States, because they love Trump in the United States.
It's hard to know, because his approval rating is 40%. Yeah, go ahead.
I also heard in another shiur that in the time of Yosef,
Yes.
all the things that he was allowed, Pharaoh who believed immediately in his explanations of the dreams, and when he was allowed to bring his parents and so, that this time of Pharaoh also were from the children of Abraham.
These,
That this was his
Ixos.
yes.
The Ixos.
Yeah.
That's what they think. They don't really know. Because that's what it means, Asheloyodas Paroi. So
because
they
it was abnormal, all the things that were allowed. He was allowed to bring his parents. He was called to explain the dreams.
Yeah, okay.
And
But
Pharaoh believed them over his own.
okay. I'm not
because
clear, but
there
okay,
was
what
a
you're
spark
saying, yeah.
of Abraham there.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Rabbi, quick question for you. You mentioned that that the majority of Jews, especially if you've been in America lately, are not into Torah right now.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a a secularization of the Jewish people,
Yes.
especially in America, intermarriage, the whole bit.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what role, like why Hashem, like what the timing is between some of these miracles, of messianic miracles, and at the same time this sort of alienation. And I'm concerned about the concept that unless we have unity, we're not going to be able to reach that point of messianic.
No, but I'm not. The messianic progress that is happening now is not Achishena, it's Be'itoy. There is a time that the Mashiach must come no matter what. God swore. What we are witnessing is not that the Jews are bringing the Mashiach because of merit. That's called Achishena, that I will hasten it. What God is, what we are witnessing is Be'itoy.
It does become a tragedy though, right?
It could come, yes, and it could. That's the Holocaust. It's part of the Eater. No, it's okay, thanks. It's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was at the coastal the other day
Yeah.
in governing, and you're talking about how it will become a house for all peoples. And it's incredible. All peoples are coming already. But
Yeah.
a girl came up next.
Do you know the tourist rate of Israel? The last year, 2010, broke the record. I think 3.5 million people. Remember, Israel only has 8. 3.5 million people are tourists, right? And they predict that I think in 10 years, something like that, 10 million tourists, more than the people of the state. That means what's happening now is all of a sudden everybody wants to go to Israel. Israel is becoming the in place, and that's why they're building another terminal in Ben Gurion.
But listen to what happened. A girl came up next to me.
Yeah.
A very nice, able girl. And she was davening, very with her heart, and she was davening out loud. She was making very clear, I could hear her every word.
Yeah.
She was a Christian, but she was saying, I'm davening to you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I believe in you. But she ended her prayer with, Yeshka's name.
Yeah.
But she recognized that the God of Israel is her God.
Yeah.
She's not there yet, but she's, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I wanted to grab her and say, you know, let me take you to someone.
Well, you know, a lot of, I think what's happened, a lot of Christians are coming to the realization, it's not like they're disowning Yeshu, but I think he's becoming much less popular. I think they realize, you know, in the end, you know, what do you mean the Son of God? Give me a break. It's God. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? God controls the universe, not Yeshu, even if they think he's the Son of God. You know? So I get the feeling that many Christians are now turning to God. They still mention Yeshu because that's the Trinity is obviously a very important part, but he's not as popular as he used to be. To use that word. Wait, yes, go ahead.
It's so exciting, Rabbi. Thank you to hear your passion about this Pence speech. Like it is written in heaven for our, advocacy.
Yes.
But we know that speech is written by staff. So who wrote the Pence speech?
Who wrote it?
Right.
Well, there's an article in the paper that said Jonathan Sachs, he used to be the chief rabbi of England. He was very significant. I don't know if he wrote the whole thing, but he was very significant. But I want to tell you something. I don't really care who wrote it. Pence had to agree.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you something. It's not Pence who had to agree. It's his boss. Pence can't say something if Trump says, excuse me, what are you doing? So really Pence is speaking in the name of Trump, right? And they both read the speech. They had to agree to it. And when Pence said, either Trump fainted or Trump said, right on. I mean, it's one or the other, But yeah, notice that's the key. I don't know who wrote it, but they agreed that this incredible speech is going to be read and become historical. This is a historical speech.
I read an article today that Pence, behind Pence, there's an ulterior motive like that. There's the Jews will be successful and everything because they'll be the second coming of the. What is how does?
I want to tell you something. Second coming. I don't really care what his motive is. There are clearly evangelicals there's a lot of them that give money to Israel. Yeah, so they have their motive because I'll tell you something funny, right? The Pope went to the Kessin, remember? Pope in 2000? He went to pray at the Kessin, right? Why did he go to the Kessin then? No Pope has ever visited the Kessin because it's a terrible admission, you see? Because the Christians have a big problem. Because if you look at the New Testament, which I hope you don't, but if you look at the New Testament, it clearly indicates that Jesus said, that I am going to come, the kingdom of heaven will arrive now. He was clearly talking in his time. You probably can verify that. You see, so they have a big problem. Wait a minute. He never came in his time. He hasn't come for 2,000 years. There's a problem here. Where is this guy? All right? It's a big problem. Now, they think that, well, the millennium is a propitious time for him to come. So now we're entering 2000, right? The guy's not around for 2,000 years. And in the New Testament, it clearly says that he's going to come then. The kingdom of heaven is in your lifetime. And he says that. You will see the kingdom of heaven. So this is a big problem for Christianity. Where is he? You see, now, the real question is, they're right. It is a problem. Where is he? And you know what the answer is? Because he's dead. Well, that's a simple answer to this. But I believe the Pope realized that he thought, wait a minute, I know why he's not coming. Because we overdid it to the Jews. Because even they admit that the Jews were the people of the book. The Jews are the chosen people. They admit that, you see? Except they believe what's called replacement theory, right? Or theology. Is that God replaced the Jews for the Christians because the Jews didn't accept him and they did. Fine, okay. So why isn't he here? So I believe, this is my belief, as far as I'm concerned, I'm right. Okay? is that this bothers Catholics, Christians. So he said like this, I believe the reason why we did it, why he's not here, is because we overdid it. We killed really the children of God. Okay, so he replaced them, right? But how do you go kill my kids like that? We butchered them for 2,000 years. So he came up with an incredible solution. I'm going to go to the Kessin. I'm going to go to the wall, and I will ask forgiveness. And that's what he did. You see? I will ask forgiveness for killing the Jews for 2,000 years. So he said, oh, right? You know what? That's why he did it. Not because he wanted, because of Kessin, because he understands that God is mad at them. So he's not letting his son come back. You see? So that's why he went to the Kessin, to beg God forgiveness that we killed too many Jews, we had too much pleasure, etc., etc. You see? Did he come back? Of course not, because he's dead. But that's why he went to the Kessin. You see? So, of course they have a motive why, But the idea is with and without their motive. In the end, he's saying, may God bless the Jewish people. He's not saying, may God bring Jesus back. He's not saying that. He's saying, bless the Jewish people. And he's sincere. I believe that's what he's really saying. He really believes in the God of Israel, the greatness and the uniqueness and the singularity of the Jewish people, you see? And he says it, So why should I attribute a secondary motive or an ulterior motive to Pence? Why should I do that? In no way, he indicates completely the greatness of God, the Jewish people, over and over again. And he says things which are unheard of for anybody ever to say, So I believe this man is of pure heart. In fact, I believe he's a reincarnation of somebody who was an Oyev Yisrael. And you can think about who, because it's a reward for Pence, the governor of Indiana. Now he's the president. I believe he's a reincarnation, what was that?
Vice President.
Well, he was the governor of Indiana.
Right, now he's vice president.
I know, what did I say?
President.
Oh, okay.
Promoted him.
No. But I believe that what the Baruch did is he picked somebody a long time ago who's an Oyev Yisrael, who loves the Jews, and who helped the Jews enormously. You see? And God said, I will send you back to finish your job. That's the reward of Pence. Who he is, that's conjecture, and so on. Trump is easy to figure out, because he's the equivalent of a Roman emperor. A vice president is more difficult. He could be, as some people say, Cyrus, who was very good friends with Shlomo Melech. But be that as it may, he's clearly somebody like that. And he's being rewarded and asked to finish the job of Avos Yisrael. So, I'm not going to impute to him ulterior motives. Take it at face value. Yeah.
Also, as far as the Mashiach process.
What was that?
As far as the Mashiach.
Could you speak louder?
As far as the Mashiach process, they say there should be no more Shibud Malchia. So once Russia was opened up, no more Shibud Malchut. No more Jews are refugees. I mean, all Jews, go where they need to go.
Yes.
So as part of the Mashiach.
If you compile a list of things that are happening today, right? You cannot but know that the Mashiach is around the corner. Think about that. One, the existence of the Jews is beyond belief. How can a nation continue to exist when there are 2,000 years in exile? Tolstoy and Mark Twain held that's the proof that the God of the Jews exists. Because it's impossible. Not only they existed for 2,000 years, right? But they existed in exile. No country, no language, right? And they're among Christians, other nations. So that's the first proof, is the existence of the Jew. The second incredible thing, right, is what's called the importance of the Jew. There was a story where the Japanese guy went over to a Jewish person, and he said, I hear about Israel, where is it on the map? So, right? So they brought a map, and the guy pointed to this little dot in the map. Have you ever looked at Israel in the map of the world? What is that? Right? It's almost like a memory of a country. I'm saying? So the Japanese guy told the Jewish guy, you're lying to me. He says, what do you mean I'm lying? I'm not lying. This is Israel. He says, it's impossible. How can a country that size be on the mind of everybody every day? It's impossible. And he's right. Because the Jews live by miracles. You see. So that's a second idea. How can the Jews occupy world history the minds of people, UN, I mean, newspapers, they're always being talked about. The third idea is the Jews are one of the greatest contributors to progress of civilization ever known. 1/3, now remember, the Jewish people number less than 1/4% of the world's population. And by now it's even less, right? How is it possible that this people number 1/3 of all Nobel laureates? There is no nation in the world that can even come close to that. That means 35% of Nobel laureates, which is the cream and the crown, right, of information, discovery, right? And the Jews are 35%. And they number, there's not even a dogma, there's not even a parallel to that. In history, that's a third, and it's not because the Jews are the book, because that's God's blessing to them. That wherever you go, you will always be involved in chokhmah, wisdom, education, because that's the Torah says. This is your wisdom. Okay? That's the third proof. Fourth proof. I'm just showing you, just look at the old proofs, that it's impossible. How can a nation get back its country after 2,000 years of exile? We have Israel back. You should know, it's historically almost unprecedented that the Jews were able to get back Israel, right, after 2,000 years. And not only that, what about the resurrection of the Hebrew language? The Hebrew is a dead language for 2,000 years. How in the world, you know, you go into the street, it's all Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? That's unheard of. No language has ever been resurrected after being dead for 2,000 years. Think about that. You ever hear anybody speak Latin? You know, and that's the Roman Empire, right? That's another miracle. You see. And then there's other miracles, you know, the fact that there is no more Golos, really. That all the Jews, because the Goyim have lost their ability, right, to persecute the Jews. That's the beginning of the end of the diaspora, the physical diaspora, not the spiritual, right? That itself is incredible. And we've been witnessing that when? You know, only in the last 30 years, whatever. Each one of these things is unheard of in human history. And the Jews constantly violate the rules all the time. And how do we know that? How do we know that? Because the truth is, the Jews should never have existed. Why? How old was Avram Avinu when he gave birth to Yitzchak? 100 years. Okay, but that's a miracle, but it was a bigger miracle. Who? Sarah, right? You can tell me a 90-year-old woman is going to have a kid? That is the greatest miracle in the annals of obstetrics, gynecology, right? So really, why did God do that? He didn't have to do that. He could have had Sarah give birth to Yitzchak as a young woman. Okay, 50, 40, 50, 60, right? But 90? And the answer is, because what God was saying to the Jews, you know, you exist only by miracles. Just like your birth is a miracle, guess what? The rest of your existence will only be a miracle. That's what God's telling them. You see? In other words, the Jews cannot exist naturally. They can only exist by a miracle. And that's why you will find miracle after miracle after miracle. You know? And like I say, you know, it's absolutely astounding. So it's not just what's happening today, you know? But when you think about that, it's what's happening for 4,000 years that the Jews cannot. That is the greatest proof, and even Tolstoy was shocked. He himself said, the greatest proof that the Jewish religion is correct, and Mark Twain said that, is the existence of the Jew. In fact, I think Rabbi Mendel says that. It's the greatest of all proofs, because no nation of antiquity exists today. That's what Rabbi Mendel says. Only the Jews. And that's why, you know, I always get a kick. You know, I was in Italy. I went to the Roman Forum, right? The Roman Forum, the old Roman Empire, right? And there it is, the Ark of Titus, right? And in the Ark of Titus, there's the menorah being carried away. You know, and I looked around and I said, wow, you know, this whole place, the whole Roman Forum, which is old Rome, right, is all destroyed. all destroyed. And I'm the Jew that they've been trying to destroy, for how many thousands of years? I look at their destruction and I laugh. You see, the guy would be in shock. The greatest is Hitler. Because he cannot believe that what he tried to eradicate and stamp out not only flourishes, right, but it's in your face. He would never believe that. Because what they all fail to understand is you cannot destroy the Jews. And Mark Twain said that. The Jew is indestructible. You know why? Because he has to do the tikkun. That's why. He's the Masakin. You cannot destroy the builder if he's the only guy who can build your house. The only one who can bring God back is the Jew. So God must let him survive. Yeah, he may punish him, reduce his numbers, a lot of things, but he cannot utterly destroy the Jew because then nobody will bring God back, and therefore the entire purpose of creation will have been naught, for nothing. And God will never allow that to happen. That's why there always has to be a Jew, or Jews, and so on, see? And so therefore the whole history of the Jews is miraculous. Even the birth of Yitzchak is a miracle. And of course Avraham Avinu, you remember, they threw him into the furnace, right? How did he get out of the furnace? You see? So Avraham Avinu is a miracle. You can't survive a furnace. That furnace must have been 1,500 degrees. And he walked in, and he walked out. You see? So the founders of Judaism is all miracle. Jews should not be. It is impossible. Yet they are alive, they are vibrant. Guess what? They're back again. And they're climbing to the top. It's astounding. Last question.
Some people, of course, have called Germany Amalek.
Yes.
And
I have.
Okay. It's very ironic that there's a far right-wing party now in Germany, Alternative for Deutschland. They're very anti-Islamic immigration, and they say that Islam as a religion has no place in German culture.
Yes.
And one of their leading members just converted to Islam, which at least is one level up in monotheism. 3 days ago, one of the main leaders of that party converted to Islam.
Yeah, and so therefore what's the
So I'm
point?
saying it's like Amalek is moving up, at least in monotheism, coming maybe towards it. He became
Amalek.
royal, at least,
Look, there is an Amalek, but Amalek is really it's a belief system. Amalek is more than just Germany. I don't know if you know, but Europe is basically German. It's all German. France, Gaul, in the old days was German. The whole England is German. In fact, I hate to say this, but Queen Elizabeth is German. She doesn't advertise that, but she comes from the House of Windsor, right? And that was German. Of course, they'll never advertise that, because what? You mean the Queen of England is a German? No, they are. The origins of the royalty is German.
The Israelis call all us English-speaking people in Israel Anglo-Saxons.
The what?
Israelis call us Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah.
The Jews in Israel.
Anglo-Saxons, yeah. Well, Anglo-Saxons, yeah. But anyway, this is what you have to think about. It's not today. The history of the Jew is miraculous, from beginning to end. That's really the whole story. And that's why, since we are miraculous, we will survive everybody, and in the end we will bring the redemption. Because if it's a miracle, what's the problem? What do you have to worry about? It's all a miracle anyway. And guess what? A miracle has no limitations. That's why it's a miracle. Okay, thank you.
It's